Churchill Resources is chasing high-grade nickel sulphide in western Newfoundland. Joining us now to give us an update on the company's progress is the CEO, Paul Sobie. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
For those who may be unfamiliar with Churchill Resources, can you give us sort of a brief, high-level overview of what you're up to?
Yeah, sure. So we're a fairly new company listed in June of 2020 with the help of Red Cloud, and that was based on our initial nickel transaction with Altius Minerals out of St. John's, Newfoundland. So we did two deals with Altius. The initial qualifying transaction is a property called Brook, which is on the island of Newfoundland. And upon going public in June, we acquired the Florence Lake option as well. That one's in Labrador. Both have high-grade past exploration successes in terms of intersecting high grade, and that was very much our focus, very much our priority, is that we want to be looking for the next Voisey Bay or Raglan, the next high grade Canadian nickel deposit.
And we'll talk about Florence Lake in just a second, but let's focus on Brook.
Sure.
You're in phase 2 right now, and you're drilling. You're chasing something very large, as you say. So can you tell us what the phase 2 program is all about, and
Sure.
what are you learning about the property so far?
Okay. So the reputation or the past work on Taylor Brook had ascribed the known mineralization to narrow dikes. In other words, that it was a narrow tabular feature and probably didn't have much in the way of tonnage potential. And very early on in our 2021 program, we intersected about 100 meters of disseminated and blebby mineralization. And all of a sudden it meant that we were onto something much larger. And so the drilling in 2021 established that the host rock, if you will, for the mineralization is a mafic to ultramafic rock called a gabbronorite, which is commonly a host to nickel deposits, and that this individual occurrence was quite large, and such the known mineralization was really a small part of something much, much larger. And in 2022, we've been building on that, and we can now show that it's part of something that's quite extensive, kilometers long, in fact. So we're still focused on where the mineralization is in terms of where we're drilling, but we're creating new drill targets along the trend.
And you've said, Paul, that you have high confidence that you may be onto something dense and heavy and sulfide rich.
Yeah, and that confidence comes not only from the rocks we're seeing and the experts that are on my team, including a lady named Dawn Evans-Lambswood, who goes all the way back to the discovery of Voisey Bay, and she's a structural geologist and helped figure out those deposits.
Sorry, not to interrupt, but I understand she's sort of a bit of a legend in the area.
She is. She is actually very, very well known and very well published, and quite an amazing lady. Can see in 3 dimensions as she looks at drill core. Mm-hmm. And through her and my other chief consultant, who's a fellow named Dr. Derek Wilton, ex of Memorial University in St. John's, we really, how shall I put it, we recognize that we're into a large system. And our focus now is on finding where all this brecciated mineralization actually coalesces. And we're confident that we will eventually find that big intersection because we've got small intersections of massive sulfide now. And this is much better than what had ever been found historically on the property, both at surface and by past drilling. So it's encouraging, put it that way. It's encouraging. And the results for that will be coming out very shortly.
All right, very good. You mentioned Altius Minerals. So
yes.
You've recently added 5 additional leases, and you're calling it the Cormac Zone, correct?
That's right, yeah.
So you're doing some sampling?
Yeah.
And what are you learning there?
Well, so that property package was added on because the regional geophysical signature, the gravity signature for the Taylor Brook area, was actually quite extensive and goes about 100 kilometers down towards Deer Lake, and so that property package allowed us to follow this other trend that's important to us. And our sampling there, I just got the results yesterday, actually, or just got the interpretation of the results, and it does suggest that there is another intrusion. There's another mafic to ultramafic intrusion down in the south part of that property, which is what had been supposed based on the geophysical data. But now it looks like we're confirming it. And so that's another area of sort of grassroots potential that we'll be exploring through the remainder of this year and into next year.
All right, Paul. So update us rather on Florence Lake in Labrador, if you could. And I'm curious as well how you're using state-of-the-art technology in geophysics to augment what was done by previous owners there.
Yeah. So this is an ex-Falconbridge property. They explored it quite aggressively in 1992 and 1993. And did great work, actually. Without a doubt, they discovered 6 nickel-bearing areas. On one of them, they have drilled enough to show that there is a channel. There is an accumulation of nickel sulfides, let's put it that way. But, technology has changed. So if you think about 1992, that's 30 years ago. Well, think about the fact that no one had a cell phone in 1992. And what can you do with a cell phone now? Well, exploration is similar. What we can do now with geophysics and other techniques is astounding compared to what Falconbridge was doing back then. So we're bringing all of that. We flew a VTEM survey, which is the most high-powered EM survey. We flew at very, very dense lines. That has given us a myriad of targets. And for the past month, my crews have been following these up with soil geochemistry. And again, even soil geochemistry techniques have changed in terms of the analytical techniques. So we'll bring all of that to bear, and by the end of this year, we'll have a complete modern database, a base level, if you will, and then we're compiling the past Falconbridge results. And all of this will be accumulated into prioritization of drill targets for next year. And with that in mind, we are actually getting ready to ship an awful lot of our equipment and supplies for the camp, which will be built over the winter such that we're ready to go in the spring there with a drilling program.
Great. Now, on the financial side, you recently raised $4 million through a private placement. How are you allocating that money, and does that mean you're pretty nicely cashed up for the near future?
Yes, so that was primarily flow-through, that financing, and again, that was with the help of Red Cloud and Canaccord actually on that one. So those monies are being deployed on the properties. Very, aggressive program on Taylor Brook. We've probably spent $2.5 million this year, I would think, on that project, and coming up to about $1 million on Florence Lake. We had a treasury, though, at the time that we raised that money, and my goal is to make sure that this company is still has a nice treasury at the end of this year, given market conditions. But all things being equal, we would love to raise some more and keep the momentum on both projects.
Now, Paul, broadly with nickel and the transition we're seeing to green energy and to electric vehicles, what's your view of nickel, but also how Churchill Resources may fit into that whole story?
Right. Well, I'm sure everybody has seen some of these statistics about how much more nickel and how many more nickel mines would be needed and all these sorts of things in order to, make sure that, Tesla can build 20 million cars a year or whatever it is that they want to do. It is a case of that nickel is quite scarce, especially class 1 nickel, sulphide nickel. Sudbury is in the waning years of a 100-year mining history. Thompson's just about done. Even Norilsk nickel in Russia, of course, there's geopolitical concerns there, but it's also a very, very old mining camp. So there's not that much new coming into the pipeline. And therefore, companies like Churchill that are exploring in really new areas as opposed to some that are looking at known deposits. I mean, these are going to be the future. Companies that are trying to find new areas and perhaps new mining camps. And that was what appealed to me about these two projects from Altius, is that it wasn't going back to known places. It was going to something new that hadn't been in the public domain and that had real scale potential to them. So in that context, it's quite rewarding to be not making discoveries per se, but at least be on the road to one.
Right.
Yeah.
Lastly, Paul, Timothy Lee, the Red Cloud analyst, visited the Taylor Brook site, and he came away impressed. He called it well located, highly prospective. So going out the next few quarters, what can investors look for in terms of catalysts? Right.
So investors will have noticed that we've been very quiet on the press release front for the last 4 or 5 months, and that was deliberate given market conditions. We actually held off on sending in a lot of our assays, and they all went in August. They are arriving as we speak, and I expect that in the next week or 2 weeks we'll have an announcement on the results of our first 7 drill holes in 2022, as well as some channel sampling on surface and 17 or 1,800 geochemical samples from soil sampling. So all of this will be coming out, as well as news from Florence Lake and news from Cormac, and so all of that is being delivered to the markets, and we'll be announcing our next targets and intentions.
So a steady news flow then.
Finally, yes.
All right, very good. Thanks, Paul. Great to see you, and good luck with everything. We'll see you again.
Well, thank you very much. My pleasure.
Okay, Paul Sobie, the CEO of Churchill Resources. Our thanks to him. Thanks a lot for watching, and we'll see you next time.